The first question that is obligatory in any speaker in addressing an audience is, why should you care? Why are we here? What does it matter whether or not we undertake impeachment and enforce the Constitution undefiled as received from the Founding Fathers and then as amended thereafter? I suggest if we do not enforce the Constitution against President Bush and Cheney, our entire country, as envisioned by the Declaration of Independence, is in jeopardy. Now, what was the revolutionary idea in that declaration? All of us are endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that the purpose of government is to secure those rights. The purpose is not to build an empire. It's not to aggrandize government power and to exert power for the sake of power's sake. You cannot secure those rights without the rule of law. And this president has violated, shattered every check and balance that was conceived by the Founding Fathers. Indeed, we have to go back to pre-Magna Carta days, 8 centuries, days of the Stuart monarchs, 3.5 centuries ago, to find an executive power so bloated. When we discuss what has been happening under this administration and have evoked in our mind images of the Soviet Union or the Spanish Inquisition, we should be alarmed. That's not the United States that we know. We are not vassals. Our rights are not at the sufferance of the president. Let me try to explain just some of the theories of power that this president has asserted and why they are truly frightening. After many upheavals in Great Britain, in 1688, the English Bill of Rights prohibited the executive, the king, from expending money and undertaking wars without any explicit authorization from Parliament. That was noted, by the way, as one of the Bill of Rights, because checks and balances is sort of the procedural Bill of Rights that we have under the Constitution. This president most recently issued a signing statement on January 28th, 2008, a day that I've said that should live in infamy. Congress had enacted the National Defense Authorization Act of 2008, and there were worries that President Bush was negotiating permanent U.S. military bases in Iraq. Certainly, Congress has a concern, maybe incorrect or not, but certainly an authority to decide whether or not we want permanent military bases in Iraq. And in a provision of this law, it's actually section 1222, it states that there shall be no monies that are authorized by this bill that shall be employed for the purpose of establishing permanent military bases in Iraq. Very clear language. The English is not able to be spoken with greater lucidity. President Bush's signing statement, when you denude it of all its legalisms, says, I don't have to follow that particular limitation because it would impair my ability to protect the national security of the United States and to execute my powers as commander-in-chief. Now, these assertions are rather astonishing. The Congress all the time, from the inception of the Constitution, limits, regulates, confines the president in national security or foreign policy affairs. One of the very first instances was a decision by Congress not to authorize John Adams, then president, in the semi-war with France to capture ships sailing from France as opposed to the United States, a power, by the way, that was upheld by Chief Justice John Marshall. I would wager, and maybe Liz can confirm, that there have been more than 1,000 laws from the beginning of the Constitution where Congress has regulated and limited the president's decisions in national security affairs. Liz was the author of a famous one that limited money that prevented Nixon from carrying the Vietnam War into Cambodia and to Laos. These have all been accepted and tried and true ways by which we keep an equilibrium of power. We prevent following the decline and fall of Rome by having adventurous wars abroad for no reason other than to exert power for its own sake. And remember, the executive branch has an incentive to inflate danger, because when danger is inflated, whether bogus or imaginary, power gravitates to the president. Secrecy gravitates to the president. He rallies the people behind him. We need to do this for the sake of the country. There'll be a caliphate in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, unless I can spy on all of you. play judge, jury, and prosecutor at Guantanamo Bay, and all the other things that he has said that tramples on all of our liberties. That's why the Founding Fathers and James Madison, the father of the Constitution, said, we have given the power of the purse to the Congress precisely as an invincible weapon to redress grievances against the president. Then, in January 28th, the president says, all this history is null and void by one stroke of the pen. 200 years of history. And what has Congress done? Whimpered. I'm going to be testifying next Tuesday on this issue. And I was going to say, what's the remedy? What's the remedy? It's impeachment. Of course, the administration is refusing to send anyone up to discuss what, in fact, they are doing to implement the signing statement. Again, another instance of thwarting congressional oversight and pretending there's only one branch of government left in the United States of America, and it is the executive branch. It is very, very alarming that the members of Congress, and indeed too many members of the public, accept this idea that we are all vassals of the president. He knows everything, and we're not to speak about it. And indeed, some of the most outlandish things have come from the administration suggesting it's unpatriotic to discuss FISA because we're giving aid and comfort to the enemy. That if we criticize the president, we're giving aid and comfort to the enemy. If we criticize lunacies like the Bay of Pigs, that we're giving aid and comfort to the enemy. This idea that the president is infallible, that is true constitutional heresy. Heresy. You need checks and balances because no one is infallible. It took the Fulbright hearings in the 60s to expose Lyndon Johnson's delusion that there was light at the end of the tunnel if we just stayed there a few more years. That's why we have checks and balances. We do not have people in power who are angels. Ambition has to be made to counteract ambition. And we need more sunlight and more discussion, not less. And ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution lies in our hands. Grover Cleveland, in his first inaugural, said he took a constitutional oath to support and defend, our charter. But he also said every citizen has a duty to be vigilant and to evaluate and check government officials who do wrong. If we don't exercise that responsibility, insist on impeachment, make it a litmus test for voting every bit as much as the NRA makes gun control a litmus test, it is our fault. We still have the ability in the United States today to speak out, to complain, to protest, to march. That's what we need to do. March on Washington, march at Nancy Pelosi's office, and tell her she needs to put impeachment back on the table. Not for Republicans or Democrats. And you'll hear these statements, well, the Democrats say that it may be adverse to their chances in 2008 if impeachment is undertaken. And my retort is, where in the Constitution does it say your oath is to support the Democratic Party? There is only one unflagging oath, and that's to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Everything else is subordinate. Now, I want to address this, I think, bogus argument that since Bush and Cheney will be in office only a few more months, why go through the proceeding? The fact is, presidents don't voluntarily surrender power. Have you heard any of the candidates stand up and say, if I'm president, we're not going to have military commissions play judge, jury, and prosecutor. We have civilian trials, due process of law, even for the most despised, whether Timothy McVeigh or Sheikh Mohammed. We play American rules. Our system of justice can handle any terrorist threat through due process of law. Not one candidate has stood up and said, I'm shifting those trials to a civilian court. Not one. The fact is that impeachment now would place the greatest restraints on the successors in the White House, not the current ones. It is not a partisan issue. The most frightening element here